outline. What is genre? Genres in literature, that is our first part, and the second part would be what is poetry, characteristics of modern poetry. And the third and the last part is just like this: what is drama? What are the characteristics of modern drama? So here we see that there are three parts in this presentation. We'll be discussing it in detail: what is genre, and especially genres in English literature. And the second part, there's poetry, characteristics of modern poetry. What is drama? What are the characteristics of modern drama? So there are three parts, and let's start the first part: genre. Genre means a type of art, literature or music, characterized by a specific form, content and style. So genre means a type, a kind of art, literature or music characterized by a specific form, content and style. For example, literature has four main genres, four main types. This is the first division that we are seeing at. The first genre is poetry, second drama, third fiction, and fourth non-fiction. There is a first division of genres. All of these genres have particular features and functions that distinguish them, that differentiate them from one another. That poetry is quite categorically different from drama or play, and fiction and non-fiction are just opposite to each other. And hence it is necessary on the part of readers to know which category of genre they are reading in order to understand the message it conveys. The reader must know what I am reading, whether it's poetry, whether it's play, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, as they may have certain expectations prior to the reading concerned. Because unconsciously we have expectations that we are going to read poetry, and if surprisingly there is some prose paragraph, so we are surprised that whether it's poetry or prose, because I was expecting to read poetry, but here it is prose, so we are surprised. So we have prior expectations that before reading we have some expectations that what I am going to study. So there are categorical differences between these genres. So it is the first division, but we will focus on the second division, and the second division is quite logical. So the second is just about non-fiction and fiction. So some experts say that there are two genres in English literature, that is non-fiction and fiction. All other categories come under the umbrella of whether non-fiction or fiction. So we will discuss non-fiction first, that what are subgenres of non-fiction. Non-fiction is the major genre of literature, English literature, and there are subgenres as well, four subgenres. Number one, essays. Fiction means imaginative, simply, and non-fiction means unimaginative writings, that there is less tint of imagination. A writer is not so much imaginative in his writing, so he's writing non-fiction. So essays is one of the subgenres of non-fiction, because essays are not so much imaginative as novel or short story, etc. So we are studying here essays. Essays are a short literary compositions that reflect the author's outlook or point. Means there is some point of view, and that is about only subjective outlook. You understand? Subjective outlook, that there's the opinion of the writer. Means if there is some essay like co-education, so that's what's your point of view about co-education. It is subjective point of view. That what is your opinion about co-education, whether there should be co-education or not. So you can write some essay on it. So a short literary composition on a particular theme or subject. Subjects like my last day at school, my first day at college, etc. So my best day, like that, my friend. There's some specific subject, and what's your opinion about this subject? That becomes an essay. Usually in prose, essays are in prose, not in poetry, and generally analytic, and good essays are analytic, speculative or interpretative. So these are kinds of essays. Now the second category of non-fiction is biography. Bio means life and graphy means writing. So someone's life in writing, that is a second subgenre of non-fiction. A biography is written account of another person's life. Means if you write something about another person, about your teacher or your mom or your father, etc., that's biography. Autobiography, auto means talking about self, about yourself, so that is autobiography. If you write something about your own life, that is autobiography. So autobiography gives history of a person's life written or told by that person himself. Speech is the faculty or power of speaking. Now we are reading the fourth subgenre of non-fiction, that is speech. Speech is the faculty or power of speaking. Oral communication, ability to express one's thoughts and emotions by speech, sounds, and gesture, generally delivered in the form of an address or discourse. So there's speech, and there's all about non-fiction. There are subgenres: essays, biography, autobiography, and speech. Now we are going to the next slide, and that is about genres of fiction. We have gone through non-fiction, and here we see genres of fiction. The first subgenre of fiction is drama. That's quite imaginative, and it's why that it belongs to fiction. Drama is the genre of literature that's subject for composition and dramatic art in the way it is represented. This genre is stories composed in verse or prose. So it means that drama may be in blank verse, especially in poetry, or in prose. In both of the forms, there are examples of dramas. We may find very good examples of blank verse dramas, and you know that dramas in prose as well. Usually for theatrical performance, so they are written for theatrical performance, so they become play, where conflicts and emotions are expressed through dialogue and action. Poetry, we would discuss it in detail in the next section. So poetry is verse and rhythmic writing with imagery, that there are so many images that evokes, that inspires, or that promotes an emotional response from the reader. The art of poetry is rhythmical in composition, written or spoken. This genre of literature is for exciting pleasure by beautiful, imaginative, or elevated thoughts. So this is the third subgenre, fantasy. That's also imaginative, is the forming of mental images with strange or otherworldly settings or characters. The characters and the situations are quite otherworldly. They are not worldly, they don't belong to this world, rather some other world. So this fantasy, imaginative writing, one of the most imaginative writings. Fiction, which invites suspension of reality, means you have to put aside some kind of reality. If you judge it with the real rules, with the real things, you won't be able to understand fantasy because it's too imaginative. Humor is the faculty of perceiving what is amusing or comical, comedy-like, funny. Fiction full of fun, fancy, and excitement, which means to entertain. So humor means to entertain, not to tease, because that becomes a satire when it's teasing. This genre of literature can actually be seen and contained within all genres. Means this genre may be in some kind of drama or poetry, or in other forms of literature. It can be found. A fable is a story about supernatural or extraordinary people, usually in form of narration, that demonstrates a useful truth, an important thing, that is useful truth, beneficial truth. It's good for humankind. Fables, stories about animals. Dusty Crow is a fable because it gives moral lesson, but it's through some animal. In fables, animals often speak as humans, that are legendary and supernatural tales. Fairy tales or wonder tales are a kind of folk tale or fable. Sometimes the stories are about fairies or other magical creatures, usually for children. Science fiction is a story based on impact of potential science, either actual or imagined. Science fiction is one of the genres of literature that is set in future or on other planets. I think you may have read in your first year book Dark They Were and Golden Eyed. So that's science fiction. That's about Mars. That human beings are going to some other planet, Neptune or planet, and their story is about the future humankind on other planets. That's science fiction. That's about the potentials of promising science. Short story. Short story is fiction of such briefness that is not able to support any subplots. There are no subplots in a short story. Yes, there are in subplots in novel or drama, but it's quite short. You have read so many short stories like Button Button and Clearing in the Sky, like that. So they all are short stories, and you are quite well abreast of the idea of short story, I think. And some other subgenres that are just mentioned here, but the detail is absent here. There is folklore, horror, legend, mystery, and mythology. So that was all in the first section, that is a genre, and especially the genres in English literature. So here we go, that types of non-fiction: essays, biography, autobiography, and speech. And this is about fiction. Second category: drama, poetry, fantasy, humor, fable, fairy tales, science fiction, and short story. So that's all about first section, and now we are going to study the next section, that is about poetry. That's quite long presentation, and I know you may feel tired a bit, but I think your spirits are more higher than this presentation. So feel at ease, feel comfortable. And here's the second section of our presentation. Are you ready for the second section? I think so, that you are ready. So here we go for the next section, that is about poetry. According to Matthew Arnold, poetry is a criticism of life under the conditions fixed for that criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. So that's the definition of poetry, although there are hundreds of other definitions as well. You also may know the definition from Wordsworth. That's more popular than this one, but I like this one. A criticism of life. Criticism means the keen observation of life. To observe life from every side, from every aspect. To see the positives and negatives of life in detail. That is criticism of life. That is done in poetry. That the keen observation is made in poetry. So poetry is a criticism of life. Under the conditions fixed for that criticism. So there are rules to write poetry. Even if you are writing some drama or novel, you must follow some rules. So those rules are fixed for that type of criticism, for drama, for novel, or here we are discussing poetry. So there are some fixed or set rules for this kind of criticism. For poetry, you must follow those rules. So the first thing about poetry is criticism of life under the conditions fixed for that criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. And those laws are all about poetic truth and poetic beauty. Although truth and beauty are the same thing. They are the two sides of the same coin. They are not different, because a false thing can never be beautiful. A true thing is always beautiful. So a beautiful thing cannot be untrue, cannot be false. You won't like falsehood. Or you like? No, not at all. You like truth. So there is beauty in truth. So a thing that is false can never be beautiful. So truth and beauty are at equal power. Equal. They are not different. They are the same. Truth and beauty. Because a false thing can never be beautiful. So there is criticism of life in poetry under some rules, and those rules are guided by truth and beauty. The rules or the things that are mentioned in poetry must be true and beautiful. And if the thing is not true, that is not poetry, because that is not beautiful. So poetry therefore should be a real classic. Poetry of Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, Milton and the like is serious criticism of life, and therefore good poetry, because they all saw the life in its very detail, very minutely. They observed life, every aspect of life. So excellence of poetry lies both in its matter and style. That the matter, the subject matter, what is written in the poetry, that must be excellent and in an excellent way, that is style. That the words you have chosen for writing that great subject matter must also be great, sublime. But matter and style must have been the accent of high beauty, worth and power. There must be power in words. They mustn't be hollow. They must be powerful. So we are talking about modern poetry now. T.S. Eliot was dominant figure, one of the most important modern poets. T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, his famous poem, totally against Victorianism and Romanticism, because every moment is a reaction to the previous one. Victorianism was a reaction against Romanticism, and the modern poetry is a reaction to Victorianism and Romanticism. Modern poetry begins, roughly you may say that modern literature begins in 1901. So totally against Victorianism and Romanticism, the 20th century poets who were in revolt against Victorianism. In the 19th century poetry, the main characteristic was preoccupation with a dream world. In 19th century, means in Victorian age, the poets were writing about some dreamy world, not a real world. So that didn't happen in 20th century. Under the new condition, modern poets could not take dream habits seriously. So they took it quite lightly, and they were more concerned with the technological world. So Arnold was not qualified to give a new direction to the poetry, one of the most important poet of modern era, although he was a link between Victorian age and the modern age, but he wasn't so much qualified or so much eligible to give new direction to poetry, so we can't say that he is father of the modern poetry. So similar was the case with Browning. Browning had no aptitude, no inclination, no predilection towards understanding the complexities of modern life. So he had no aptitude to comprehend the complicacies of modern life. So Browning is more a Victorian than a modern poet. It was essential, although it was quite essential, quite compulsory, it was necessary that the new techniques of communicating meaning be discovered. It was very urgent at that time that new ways of doing poetry must be invented, but it didn't happen before T.S. Eliot. So there was an intense need to invent new ways of doing poetry, which brought about the movements known as imagism and symbolism in modern poetry. So these two are the movements of modern poetry. We will be discussing it in the next lectures, but here I mentioned imagism and symbolism, two very important movements of modern poetry. Modern poets exercise to get a freedom in choice of new themes, the new and wide range of subjects, themes and issues. So modern poets liked to discuss new technological issues in their poetry as well, that the subjects should be new, themes must be new, there mustn't be the repetition of the themes and issues that had been discussed in the last century. So here in a gist, at a glance, features of modern poetry. There's on the one slide, totally against the Victorian Romantic poetry, as we have said earlier. The disappearance of religious faith, that's important, that there was the absence of religious faith, because science was the master, and Nietzsche had also said already that God is dead. So there is disappearance of religious faith. People believed in science rather than imaginary things. The regular meters have been discarded. They didn't follow the regular meters that were very important, but they didn't follow to the major extent. No regular rhyming scheme. Juxtaposition of ideas. Juxtaposition means mixture of ideas. use of free verse, use of irony, and use of metaphors. Irony is a figure of speech in which two opposite things are said. Metaphor, the similarity between, covert similarity between two things. So these are the features of modern poetry, and here's the end of second part of our presentation. So now we are starting the third section of our presentation, that is drama. We have discussed the genre in detail, fiction and non-fiction and their subgenres, and we have discussed the definition of poetry and modern poetry, features of modern poetry in detail, and now we have come across the third section of our presentation, that is drama. Drama is a literary art which usually have characters, plot, dialogue, and acts on stage. The difference between traditional drama and modern drama is actually the theme and style. Features of modern drama. There's the first feature, that is realism, that these dramas are quite near to real life. They are not so much imaginative or away from real life. They are quite concerned with the real life problems. So realism is the most significant and outstanding quality of modern English drama. The dramatists of the earlier years of 20th century were interested in naturalism. We will be discussing naturalism in the next slides, and their endeavor to deal with real problems of life in a realistic technique to their plays. So here we see the important dramatists of modern age: George Bernard Shaw, Galsworthy, Robertson Arthur Jones, and here we come with the most important dramatist, Norwegian dramatist, that is Henrik Ibsen. So, play of ideas. Modern drama is essentially a drama of ideas rather than action. That action is less, but ideas are there in modern dramas. There are so many ideas that are presented in these dramas. So romanticism is there, and you must remember one name, that is Barry, about romantic dramas he started, and there are so many excursions in the world of romance. Poetic plays are there in modern age. T.S. Eliot was one of its founders. And historical and biographical plays, it means that someone's biography is displayed in the dramas, like Abraham Lincoln, American president. It was discussed in some drama, so that is historical drama or biographical drama, about someone's life. That is biographical plays or historical plays. And features of modern drama now. We will discuss this part. Traditional drama dealt with the supernatural elements, fate, heroic deeds. It's traditional drama, means not modern. Traditional, orthodox. Whereas modern drama deals with realism, absurdism, and naturalism. These three are the major features of modern drama. Number 1, realism. Number 2, absurdism. And number 3, naturalism. There are some characteristics of modern drama: naturalism, absurdism, and realism. Major play of absurdism is Playboy of the Western world. The Zoo Story, that's representative drama of realism, and A Doll's House is the representative play of naturalism. Let's discuss. What is absurdism? Absurdism means a uselessness, futility, nonsense of human life. So the philosophical and literary doctrine that human beings live in essential isolation, in loneliness, in a meaningless and irrational world. So our lives are meaningless. That's the major philosophy behind absurdism, that there is no use, no benefit of this life. The life is useless and meaningless, and the world is irrational, illogical. We can't understand the world, that there is no purpose of life itself. that our forefathers were living quite uselessly. They endeavored a lot in their lives, they tried hard in their lives, but they died, they expired. And so would be the case with us, and so would be the case with the coming generations. So the life is quite futile, absurd. It's a nonsense to live. So that's the major philosophy behind absurdism. One of the prominent modern playwrights is Samuel Beckett. Waiting for Godot is a nice play to mention here, and that was a hit on the stage. Waiting for Godot on the Theatre of Absurd, that was a hit. So the second major feature of modern drama is realism. The movement or style of representing familiar things, real-like things as they actually are in the real world. Another modern playwright, Edward Albee, whose one of the renowned works is the Zoo Story. So you would go through the slide by yourself. If you find any problem, you would discuss it in the lecture's time. Now we move towards the next slide, that is about the third most important quality of modern play, that is naturalism, a manner or technique of treating subject matter that presents through volume of detail of deterministic view of human life and actions. Modern playwrights like Henrik Ibsen show naturalism in his writing, as Henrik Ibsen showed in his A Doll's House, that women are always dominated by men in society as well. That is a patriarchal society, that man dominates the society. That is the tragic point of view from these writers. So some say that it is A Doll's House is a feministic play because that shows the importance of women, that they are quite important, but they are always neglected in society. They are others. So Nora is the heroine of the play. Nora was ordered to listen and dominated by her father in her childhood, and after her marriage she is also dominated by her husband as well. So she can't do anything without her husband's permission. She has no will, no right, so that she can do something by herself. Even when she did something for her husband's sake, she was marked as the guilty. So this is naturalism, that the sensitive features of society are discussed in such kind of plays. So that was the last slide from my side, and thank you.